Hello everybody, this is Dr. Wes Moore. It's great to see you today, and I am so thankful to have you on board for this session. In this session we want to talk about economic systems and compare them. We want to compare the free market to a socialist type economy and see which one comes out on top, which one we should be supporting ourselves, which one we should be wanting to be a part of, and encouraging our government to continue to support. So let's get started with that. What do we want to talk about today? Really just two things. First of all, we want to identify the four factors for evaluating economic systems. I'm going to give you four ways to evaluate and look at an economic system to see what's better. And then we want to apply those four factors to free markets and socialist economies. So let's get started. The four factors for evaluating economic systems. Let's look at these briefly. The first factor is, how well does that system provide what people need? How good is it at providing that abundance of products and services that people need to live healthy and happy lives? Secondly, how well does it limit evil? Does it tend to keep people from doing evil? Or does it tend to create more moral evil and crime and so on? Number three, what kind of government does it lead to? Is that government a free government, a democratic government, a government that gives the people plenty of freedoms? Or is it an oppressive type government? And then fourthly, how does it treat the poor? What ability does it have to provide for those who are in need? Now let's go ahead and let's compare these four factors. Let's evaluate these two systems based on the four factors we've identified. First of all, how well does it provide? The ability of an economy to provide is in part based on two things. First of all, incentives. The incentives it provides its citizens to create, take risks, and generate value. And secondly, the amount the government gets involved in the economy, which leads to waste and inefficiency. Let's look at these separately. First of all, incentives. In terms of incentives, because a free market allows individuals to own property, control prices, and receive the reward of their efforts, in other words, all their efforts aren't taxed and taken by the government, they have the greatest incentive to take risks, work tirelessly, and fully utilize their creativity and drive. Because of this, free markets provide far more for their citizens than socialist economies. And the more a nation leans toward a free market, the more it will have. Conversely, the more a nation leans towards socialism, the less it will have. No, there is no economy that is 100% free market. And there is no economy, there are very few economies that are 100% socialist. There's a spectrum for most countries and most nations. We need government, but the smaller the government is and the less it gets involved and the more individuals are making free choices and reaping the benefits of their choices through the income and the wealth that they can build and so on, the more incentive you have and the better overall an economy you will have. The more you increase the size of the government and the control of the government and take on those aspects of a socialist system, the less incentive you have and the less money you will have, wealth you will have. But what about greed? Someone says, yeah, but capitalist economies are all these greedy people. They can just do whatever they want and abuse everyone else. Well, that's technically not true. In fact, this is the genius of free markets. Let me give you an example. Let's take this guy named Jeff Bezos. Many of you know who he is, the founder of Amazon, extremely wealthy man. Let's say that Jeff Bezos is a greedy scumbag. And I don't believe that he is. And I just want to say that just because you're wealthy does not mean you're greedy. Just because you've done well does not make you greedy. You can be poor and be very greedy. You can be rich and be very generous. But let's just say that he is for the sake of the argument. Because of the law of incentives, Because in a free market, he can take his creativity, his risk, his money, put it on the line, and be able to produce tremendous value and then reap the benefits of that value. Because he has that ability in the free market of the United States. He gets up every day trying to figure out how to bring value, not first to himself, to you. Because of the law of incentives, that greedy jerk gets up every morning and goes out and tries to bring value to you. He wants to make that product just like you want it, so you will buy it, and he can pile up more money in his bank account. And that arrogant rich doctor can't wait to perfect that new surgical tool that can save thousands of lives, like yours, so he can get his picture on the cover of a magazine. That incentives takes the greed, if you will, if you want to call it greed, the drive of people, and funnels it to produce for you. Socialism doesn't do this. You still have greedy people, but most of them never have the opportunity to do anything for you. Slowly their incentives are chipped away through taxes, high taxes, regulations, government control, so that there's just no point in doing anything. The result is a system where everybody gets poor or gets poorer, except, of course, for the greedy few in government who control everything. What you need to realize is that a free market is the only economic system that turns that rich guy's greed and arrogance to your favor. You see, immoral people will exist in either system, socialism or a free market. The beauty of the free market is that it uses the immoral tendencies of individuals to bring blessings to the entire race. Socialism, on the other hand, just destroys everybody, rich and poor, righteous and sinner alike. So in terms of incentives, the free market is far superior. But the other ability you want to look at, the ability of an economy to provide, is also based on how much government waste is added to the economy. Government, by its nature, is wasteful. It wastes time, it wastes money. Whatever you put into it, you get less out than is optimal or ideal. A Cato Institute article discussed the reasons behind this. A gentleman named Chris Edwards wrote an article called Why is the Federal Government So Wasteful? In that article, he outlined 15 reasons that government is wasteful. Let me mention a few of them here to you. The first reason he gave was the government is so large, its spending cannot be completely reviewed by anyone, leading to waste and fraud. There's just too much money, too many hundreds of agencies, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of people, and trillions of dollars, and there's no way anyone can really check out where all that money is going. And so we have, over and over, we have waste and fraud in a government like ours. The second, people tend not to spend other people's money as carefully as they spend their own. You know this. Someone gives you a 20, you don't really care what you do with that 20. But if it's your 20 that you had to earn, and 20 more you're going to have to earn to replace it, you're very careful with that money. But in the government, it's somebody else's millions and billions. Just give it away. The fifth one he mentioned. Federal managers face no profit incentive, giving them little reason to proactively reduce waste and cut costs. Essentially, there's just no accountability. There's no reason for them to cut back waste and keep costs in line. In fact, a lot of times for politicians, overspending is good because that spending goes to their constituents who vote for them. So actually don't really care if money is wasted or not. And then the number 9, and I'll just mention this one, federal worker pay is generally tied to longevity, not performance. Federal workers get promoted based on how long they've been on the job, not by how well they do as a rule. So they just hang around and try to stay in their jobs. Performance is not really that important. At the conclusion of the article, Edwards posed a question, what should we do about this? How do we solve this? And here's what he had to say. I think it makes a lot of sense. He says, what is the solution to these problems? There is no straightforward technocratic way to reinvent the federal government to make it work with a decent amount of efficiency. Some of these problems can be reduced to an extent, but as long as the federal government is as large as it is, it will sadly continue wasting hundreds of billions of dollars from misallocation, mismanagement, and other problems. The only real solution to the ongoing waste in the federal government is to downsize it. Basically what he's saying is the problems are a function of the nature of a large government, and there's nothing you can do to change those other than shrink it and make it a more manageable type of situation. So on these issues, both of these criteria, free markets are far superior to socialist systems. And what we're going to find as we look at the other three is that this basic weakness here, that the more socialism you add, the less wealth you have, the less well the economy provides for its people, is going to drive all the other factors as well. So let's go on then. How well does it limit evil? How well does this system limit evil? When people can get jobs that allow them to support themselves and their families, they're much less likely to turn to violence and crime as ways of meeting those needs. It should be no surprise that the nations with the highest murder rates in the world are also some of the poorest. El Salvador, Honduras, and Venezuela are the top three in murders, and they are also some of the poorest countries in the world. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime issued a report on the connection between poverty and criminal activity. Commenting on the report, Amber Pariona of WorldAtlas.com said this: "Poverty and crime go hand in hand. Crime drives away businesses and investors, reducing available human capital, that is workers, and creating an insecure environment, which in turn leads to more poverty." So what she's saying is basically when people start getting poor, businesses and opportunities to do right and work go away, and all that's left is to do something that's morally wrong. In the same article, she also noted the connection between poverty and organized crime, poverty and gangs, poverty and drug trafficking, and poverty and drug and alcohol abuse. Because socialism reduces a nation's ability to produce wealth, to whatever degree you implement it, it will increase poverty and crime. Therefore, free markets are superior. That does not mean there's no evil in a free market. No, it simply means that we're comparing the two. And because of the wealth and abundance that can be provided in the free market, there is less of a push towards doing evil. What about the kind of government? Because socialism requires the government to be involved in more and more of the economic choices of the nation, prices, wages, regulations, what can be made, what cannot be made, who owns what, it necessarily requires the government to grow bigger and bigger and more powerful. On this point, Ronald Reagan, President of the United States from 1981 to 89, said this: "A government can't control the economy without controlling people. And America's founding fathers knew when a government sets out to do that, it must use force and coercion to achieve its purpose." We do not have to be PhDs to know that eventually power corrupts both individuals and groups. And when you give that much power to your government, sooner or later, they will use it against you. So here again, free markets win out over socialism. Now finally, how does it treat the poor? For this question, I want to deal with this in a form I often get from students. Many students will say something like this to me relative to socialism and the poor. Because in socialism the government is looking out for the people instead of profits, it will give us all an income that will provide for our needs. So there's this inherent trust that because the government is going to spread the wealth to everybody, or it says it is, that it's going to be better for the poor to move more towards a socialist economy. Yes, the idea of socialism is to give everybody the same. So you have no rich people and no poor people. But the idea of socialism and the reality of socialism are quite different. Let me show you why. Where does the government get its money? Most people don't know where the government gets its money. If the government is going to give us all an income we can use to meet all our needs, so that there are no more poor, it has to have the money to do that, correct? So where does it get its money? Contrary to popular belief, the government can't just print money to spend it because it wants to. This leads to a devaluation of its currency and extremely high inflation. If our government starts printing money just to spend, we're going to be in great trouble, and everybody knows that. So where does it get its money? Let's look at this. Okay, so the poor need money, the legitimate poor. Many people are not legitimately poor. They're lazy and they work the system. That's their job. But there are legitimately poor people that need the support of an abundant nation. All right, so that money is going to be funneled through the government. The government's going to send that money to the poor. Where does it get its money? It gets its money from really two places, taxes and borrowing. But borrowing has to be paid back eventually through taxes. So really, the government's only source of income, by and large, is taxing. Taxing people and taxing businesses. All right? But as we've already said in our first point, socialism slowly reduces the wealth of the nation. And the more you move towards socialism, the less wealth you're going to have. So there is less money and less money in businesses and less money for individuals that the government can tax. So if you implement socialism, you're going to have less money from businesses and individuals that the government can tax. So there's less tax for the government, so there's less money for the government, and there's less money to give to the poor. What we have to realize is, because socialism erodes the wealth of the nation, it also erodes the money the government has to help the poor. This means that while socialism promises more for the poor, it cannot deliver on that promise because it reduces the government's tax income and ability to help. So, socialism reduces the money the government can devote to the poor, and because of this, it is inferior again to the free market. If you want the government to have the money to help the poor, you do not want to move towards socialism. Well, that's it for this session. I really have enjoyed sharing this with you and look forward to the next session together. So have a great day.